All right, looks like we've got everyone here. I am back for a second round of moderating for anyone who just came from our last panel, but for those that are new here, I'm Marley Hauser, Senior Coordinator of Youth Leadership on NWF's Education and Engagement team, and I'll be moderating this panel. So thank you for anyone coming back to our second panel of the day, and thank you to those who are here for the first time. This panel will focus on careers in wildlife conservation at a time when biodiversity is under threat across the globe. The work of protecting wildlife and the ecosystems they depend on has never been more urgent or more inspiring. Conservation is not just about protecting remote wilderness areas. It's about working in communities, shaping public policy, educating the next generation, and building movements that connect people with nature in meaningful and lasting ways. So today, panelists represent all of these different ways of working for wildlife conservation. Each panelist will share a bit of their personal and professional journeys, the work they do today, and their advice for young environmental leaders seeking to make a difference in this area of work in their own career paths. So each panelist is going to have an opportunity to introduce themselves, then we'll jump into the question and answer section of the event. We are accepting questions from the audience, so please feel free to pop those in the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll make sure to get to as many of those questions as we can. So I'd like to kick off our introductions with Angela Crenshaw. Angela Crenshaw is the Director of Maryland Park Service, where she oversees more than 90 properties, 269 classified employees, over 142,000 preserved acres, thousands of miles of trails, and 2,200 campsites across the state. A park ranger since 2013, she has served at Elk Neck and Gunpowder Falls State Parks in Maryland and the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad State Park, where she combined her passion for the environment with honoring Tubman's legacy. In honor of Ms. Tubman's skills as a naturalist, she composed an article entitled Harriet Tubman, the Ultimate Outdoors Woman for the Department of Natural Resources magazine. In 2022, Ranger Crenshaw was honored to become the first Black lady park manager in the history of the Maryland Park Service when she accepted the position of park manager of Susquehanna Rocks and Palmer State Parks. Her contributions to the field have been recognized with honors, including the Department of Natural Resources Leader of the Year Award and the Harriet Tubman Lifetime Achievement Award. In early 2025, Ranger Crenshaw was named Maryland Woman of the Year by USA Today, providing an opportunity to share the good news of the Maryland Park Service and the incredible life of Harriet Tubman with a wider audience, including Good Morning America. So Angela, thank you so much for being here today. Could you please just tell us a bit more about your career path and any advice that you might have to folks pursuing a similar career?
Sure. Thank you for that introduction. I've shared some slides. I'm going to try and get through them fairly quickly. I like to start with my ranger journey. I think most people think rangers steal picnic baskets from Yogi Bear and we parachute and we do all these crazy things, but we do anything that's required to keep our parks clean, operable, safe, and user-friendly. I started at Elk Neck State Park. That top left image is my good boy, and he's at Turkey Point Lighthouse. If you haven't been, it's up in Cecil County, and I recommend it. Then I was promoted to Gunpowder Falls. In the middle, you can see Jerusalem Mill. That is our headquarters building. It's a restored mill. It's the only grist mill in Maryland with double wheels. Then I worked at Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad State Park. I transferred there, and I worked there until about the pandemic. I got the park open, got it going, did our Junior Rangers program. And then I transferred during the pandemic back to Gunpowder Falls to manage our beach. And that's that beautiful photo there in the middle. I'd like to tell people, never move during a pandemic. 13 out of 10 do not recommend. It was not fun at all, but those gunpowder sunsets and sunrises made it worth it. Then I became the first park manager of Susquehanna Rocks and Palmer, and that's what that image is in the middle. And then in April of 2023, I was offered the position of acting director of Maryland State Parks. And so a friend of mine had that image made at the bottom of me in my ranger uniform as a Baltimore checker spot with Harriet Tubman and my good boy. I like to tell people, if you look up the Maryland Park Service, we have a pretty rough history, starting with my tenure. Our last law enforcement ranger was sexually assaulting women on park property. So I take what I do very, very seriously. And you can learn about that if you like. Trigger warning. Go to the Baltimore Banner and type in Gunpowder Falls. I want to share a few of my fun professional experiences. And in all my slides, they're beautiful pictures of our Maryland state parks. So the one you see is the King and Queen seat up at Rock State Park in Harford County. Maryland has a rich history of segregation and keeping certain people out of our Maryland state parks, and I am actively working to make them more inclusive and involved. So I work with Outdoor Afro and Girl Trek and Black and Marine Sciences, and I used to host 5 events a year until I took over this job, and now I do about 2. We just did Juneteenth, and every year for the past 5 years, we've gone to Assateague, and that's what that image is. We get matching shirts, we kayak, we hike, we do a lot of really cool stuff. So I'm going to focus on my Outdoor Afro work a little bit. You can see that top image. We kayak on Sinnapuxent Bay, and we discover all the things that are on the bay side of the island, and we spend a lot of time camping, as you can see in that bottom image. Outdoor Afro is a very diverse group. I've divided our campers up into introverts and extroverts and whoever's in the middle. I do that on purpose because the extroverts will stay up until 5 a.m., sleep for an hour, make breakfast, and continue on with their lives. But some of the introverts can't do that. So I make sure to divide everybody up so everyone has a good time. And we also do sunrise yoga. I like to include this photo because it just shows how life-changing these experiences can be. I like to say we helped raise the sun that day. We won't take full credit, but it was a pretty amazing day. And it was one lady's first sunrise. She's in her 40s, and I was like, this is a great place to start, surrounded by friends and doing yoga on the beach. And then recently we were invited to the White House and then invited back 3 additional times. So this is me and my team. We brought eagles from our Scales and Tails program to the White House to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Endangered Species Act. You can see Ranger Sarah in both those photos with Michelle Obama, or as we call her, Mo, and Buchanan. Our Scales and Tails critters are amazing because they all have some sort of injury, which is their tail, and then they all have scales, of course. So we talk about their biology. And then we were invited back a few times and got to visit the Oval Office. And I love Christmas and Hanukkah and all those December holidays. And so seeing the White House during that time of year was pretty amazing. There's a quick YouTube video about our journey. Oh, and then I do a lot of research about Harriet Tubman. The image on the left is a descendant of Harriet Tubman touching the foundation of what we think is her father's home. I stood in the swamps with this man and talked about my research and my time learning about his 4 times great-grand aunt. And then that evening I was raving about how wonderful he was, and he sent me a picture of the night sky over Dorchester County. So I like to tell people, you may think that you're having an amazing experience, but it turns out everybody around you is having that awesome experience too. But most importantly, I like to share nature with my family and my friends. Here are me and my nieces walking in the woods in Western Maryland. Initially, they would always have a ton of questions. Now my family's just like, drop a pin, where we going, what food do we bring? So I really love sharing nature with people around me. And then they also asked us to share advice. I don't know anyone on this call, so I'm just going to share some thoughts from a ranger because I don't know where you are and I don't know what you're doing. So here are some quick thoughts from a ranger. Learn how to do public speaking your way. It's really important to be able to convey really good information really quickly. Number 2, share complicated information within the allocated time. I had a presentation to do for our department that decides how many positions we get and how much people get paid. I did my presentation in practice. It was 4 hours. Turns out I had 2 hours to do that presentation, so I had to knock out a lot, but still share all that information. They ended up approving all 80 positions, and that is moving forward, but that taught me a lot. I tell people, learn how to do creative and technical writing. That is vital. I can do any science paper, I can write poems, and then I can help my friends write their speeches. So that's vital too. Also, learn how you learn. I supervise 279 people. I know most of them. I know how most of them learn in case I have to share anything with them. I always tell people, find your passion, make it your niche, like in nature. If you are in Maryland, Delaware, or Virginia, and you want a tour of Harriet Tubman, I know who people are calling, and they're calling me. So find out what you do, get really good at it, just like in nature, and make it yours. Always make your supervisor look great. Make sure your supervisor's never surprised. My first full-time job, my supervisor chewed out this grown man who was 6'7" and she's about 4'5". I will never surprise a supervisor ever again because of that. And so I want you all to know that that's really good advice too. And have a positive mental attitude. As I said, I took over during a very rough time for the Maryland Park Service, but I always try to put on my uniform and a smile every single day. And that has made a world of difference. Grace, give it and you will receive it. We're all going to make mistakes. I give a lot of grace, and then I hope to receive it from my folks as well. And then just acknowledge you don't know what you don't know. There's a lot of information out there. Always continue to learn. And lastly, enjoy yourself. As I mentioned, I graduated about 20 years ago. I still remember being a Girl Scout and walking in the woods. I still remember my undergrad graduation. And I remember my first day of ranger school where everybody helped me fix my pins because I was the only one who was never ever a park ranger before. And that was pretty amazing. And now I wake up every morning and I'm running the park service. So my mind is absolutely blown, but I want to make sure that you all remember to enjoy your journey too. I figure you're on this call for a reason. You're driven, you're passionate, you excel at what you do, and you care. So please be sure to share that journey with everyone around you. And another thing I've learned is I can genuinely say I've changed a lot of people's life in this job, which is why I wanted to be a park ranger. I can see direct change every single day at the end of my workday. But keep in mind, you'll also change yourself, and that is very, very beautiful. And whoops, final slide is just a thank you. Thank you all for the invitation. Thank you all for participating. Thank you to my co-facilitators, and thank you to Marley and to David. And that is all I have for the Maryland Park Service. I hope you guys got to learn something and get a little insight into my crazy, wild, decades-long career.
Thank you so much, Angela, for that background. I think it's safe to say that working with you would be not only life-changing, but a really good time from the sounds of it. So appreciate you sharing that.
Very welcome.
Okay, so next we're going to hear from Brianna Amingwa. Brianna Amingwa, known as Ranger Bree, is an environmental educator and founder of Deeply Rooted Outdoor Education, where she supports students, families, and educators in finding connection, community, and comfort in nature. As a former U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service professional of nearly 13 years, she supervised a thriving environmental education program at America's First Urban Wildlife Refuge and served as the national coordinator of youth employment and environmental education. She holds a bachelor's in animal science from Michigan State University. Named a global top 30 under 30 environmental educator by the North American Association of Environmental Educators, she developed and managed education programs reaching nearly 18,000 students annually. Her expertise includes a culturally responsive teaching, trauma-informed approaches, and mastery of next-generation science standards. She is also the creator of Step Right Out framework, a comprehensive model for classroom educators to bring their curriculum to life through inquiry-based outdoor investigation. Her work is rooted in her own experiences as a city kid discovering the wonders of the outdoors. She remains committed to breaking barriers and inspiring others to explore the natural world. So, Brianna, thank you for joining us today. Same question to you, if you could share a bit about your career path to date and any advice that you have for our participants.
Definitely would love to. Hi, everybody. I'm just gonna start up sharing my screen here and then bring you back. Okay, is that showing out?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Also, thank you, Haneen, for the go green and the chat go white is my response to that. My name is Brianna Amingwa. Thanks, Marley, for reading that great intro. I want to share a little bit about myself, my journey so far, and then whatever I can impart as far as like knowledge, and I'd love to connect afterwards. So I'll get into it. So here I am now, right? Founder of Deeply Rooted Outdoor Education. It sounds really great. I just got this headshot done. I'm feeling very legit. But before that, I am from Michigan originally, from Metro Detroit area. Grew up in the city. Obviously, here's a view of Detroit from Canada. Actually, it looks very cold because it is all the time in Michigan, unless it's very hot, like right now. I have a few siblings and grew up in the city and always loved animals. I was watching like Animal Planet back in the day and was trying to like rescue all the stray cats, which I was promptly denied by my mother. Had a chance to be in Girl Scouts and spent a day at the farm. And this is little baby Brie on my life-changing day, number one. They let me get on a horse and I was like, okay, I'm over cats. I'm now into horses. Mom, you should buy me a horse. And you can guess what the response was. Absolutely not. So instead, she took me to the bookstore and I bought 3 books: The Idiot's Guide to Horses, Guide to Horses and Breeds, and one more that was about horse biology. And I read all those books cover to cover. And it wasn't years later until I found someone whom I grandmother worked with who had a farm, who knew one of the Black horsemen in Michigan, and he'd let kids from the city come out and ride his horses on Saturday for free. We didn't pay any money. We just went and helped and cleaned up and rode and shoveled poop and did the rest. And I had a chance to go on a trail ride with him through 4-H and went to northern Michigan and rode through there. And I was just shocked at what I saw. Like, I did not know that that was out there, all this huge greenery and trails and a bear den, all the rest. And that really changed me a lot because it made me want to get out more and see more of those kind of places. So I ended up going to school for animal science. Of course, I wanted to study horses and was a huge football fan, still am. Go green, go white, and go Lions. Okay, if anybody's here from the Packers or the Bears fans, you can go ahead and log off now. But always been, oh no, Angela, not you. Fair enough, fair enough. You know, we all make mistakes. So I joined a research lab at Michigan State, and it was a horse research lab. I was super excited to be there. And not too long after a semester working there, they got a new grant and changed the leadership. And all of a sudden, my horse research lab became a chicken research lab, but I already had the job. So I decided to stay and spent years studying poultry science and different caging systems and joined the Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences. That's called MANRS organization in college, and went to a career fair and learned about the Student Conservation Association. Some of you might have had internships there. That's how I discovered U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So I took an internship working at Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge in Ohio. It was a biology internship, and I thought I would love it. I was terrified every day working there. I was out in the marsh searching for an endangered orchid and spending all my time outside. Honestly, it was too much for me. That was a really learning internship because I learned that I do not want to be outside every day, deep in the marsh, doing the biology. Like, that's Sharon's bag. I know Sharon is like all about the outside stuff. Me, I'm like, I want to be outside and be cute. So I had a chance to work with students while I was there and spend time teaching instead. And that's where I knew, like, okay, this is it for me here. So I transferred into the Pathways internship, which still exists. It's a career conversion program. And I spent the whole of my career in U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. These photos here are from my time at John Hines National Wildlife Refuge, where I was the supervisor of environmental education. I managed a huge program of about 18,000 student visits annually and coordinated a whole team of staff, started an archery program, outdoor recreation, gateway programming, all kinds of stuff to get folks from Southwest Philly engaged in their really local habitat because the refuge is right in Southwest Philadelphia. So really enjoyed my time there, and I took a promotion and moved to DC, to the Metro Detroit area, Metro Detroit, DMV basically. And I was the national coordinator for youth employment and environmental education, which I was so excited to have that kind of national impact, but I really miss working with students and being with people on the ground. So after all the big federal upheaval and changeover, I decided to take one of the departure buyout packages and just make the leap and do this on my own to work with communities I'm really passionate about. In between all that, I had kids. Now I have 2 boys. They are wonderful little lunatics. And I am married, and being a parent and having all that really changed me as a person and in my career, and kind of just helped me rescope. So I'm doing the kind of business ownership thing now. Deeply Rooted is all about getting our communities outdoors. I'm really passionate about training environmental educators and training like non-formal educators to change up our lens and do things from a really culturally responsive and relevant way, right? Also kind of trauma-informed education. So teaching people about the environment in a way that they're interested in it, right? Not just what we want them to know, but what they might also bring to nature education and into a space. Outdoor rec, and I'm still doing archery and keeping that really present as a gateway program to get people excited about being outside, and then working with teachers to help them incorporate their curriculum into nature. So that's kind of what a little bit I'm doing now. I'm super happy and I'm super challenged by this. If I have advice to give, one thing I've told every person who's been my intern and even my employees, and I'm still doing it now, is to keep a little draft email or a phone note of your resume list, right? As you're working everything and doing every job, just make a note of interesting things that you do. That way, when you sit down and write your resume, you don't forget the amazing work that you've done. It doesn't have to be anything basic, anything major. Just keep a list of all the things that you do and make sure it's quantitative with numbers, right? If you've done programs with 50 people or 100 people or planned for this or sat on a panel, add this stuff to your little running resume list is one of my advice. Also, you have a right to be in these spaces, right? When I was working in Iowa, I know for a fact because some of the kids told me I was the first Black person that they had seen in their lives, right? Working in Tallgrass Prairie, and I'm the one who's going to teach them about nature. That was hard for them to kind of see, but once they sat in my programs and enjoyed it and understood that I was just a regular person who was interested in the same thing that they were, it was a lot easier. So I think coming into a lot of spaces and knowing that you have just as much right to be there as anyone else, and that you have a lot of knowledge to share, and you also have so much to learn from those around you, can really help you out in your career and in your personal life. Just that constant willingness to listen and learn, and also to share what you know as well. So I will wrap up there. Looking forward to getting into questions. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Brianna. Just very quick question for you. I'm curious if your sons have carried on your legacy of wanting to bring animals home, or
Yes.
if that, yeah. Okay.
Very much so. And it's like, I have to live with it now.
Yeah, full circle moment, right?
Yes. Yep.
Well, thank you for that background. So next we're gonna hear from Sharon Dorsey. Sharon Dorsey is a native of Baltimore, Maryland, where she supports local minority-led nature-based organizations as a science educator and community connector. She holds a bachelor's in environmental science from George Mason University and a master's in fish and wildlife conservation from Virginia Tech. Sharon is an ecologist with extensive experience in wildlife conservation, avian research, and community engagement, having worked within the private and federal sectors since 2016. She excels in storytelling and community outreach, contributing to projects like Black Birders Weekly or Black Birders Week, authoring a short story in the book Been Outside: Adventures of Black Women, Non-Binary and Gender Nonconforming People in Nature, and publishing a children's book titled Shorebirds, a compare and contrast book. She is also the founder of Shar in Nature, LLC, which provides a wide range of services from community programming, career guidance, and conservation history. So Sharon, thank you as well for joining us. And same question to you. Can you share a bit about your career path to date and any advice you have for our audience?
Thank you, Marley. I will also share my screen. Let's see if I can get this started. However, my presentation is really just going to be running photos. I'm not as coordinated as the other ladies to have it synced up, but I'm going to let it autoplay and it'll loop. So if you miss something the first time, it'll be back in a few minutes or seconds. All right. So again, Baltimore, Maryland native. My interest for environmental science and nature started in high school. And for me, that also was my path to college. I was also a student athlete in track and field. So that kind of led me to George Mason, kind of a more local university with a great science program and a great track program. Let me make sure this is going to loop because I know, let's hit play. That'll work. While I was at George Mason, Bree actually reminded me I was fortunate to participate as well in the Student Conservation Association, or SCA. And my first internship was at Chincoteague National Wildlife Refuge in Eastern Shore, Virginia. But we had an orientation with all the interns that year, and I met Bree. She was one of the mentors that year back in 2016. So it's really cool. You never know who you're going to meet again in your life in this field. So I'm glad that she's continue to be a mentor, a friend, colleague, partner, all the things. So shout out to SEA, shout out to Fish and Wildlife Service, also being my springboard into conservation. And I knew when I graduated from George Mason, I wanted to go into wildlife conservation. But it was tough to get into the federal workforce with just a bachelor's. So I had a hard time. So I actually got my first job in environmental consulting. Let me slow this down a little bit. I think it's going too fast. I'll do 15 seconds. My first job was in environmental consulting here in Baltimore, Maryland, and it got me outside in the field. I loved getting a variety of hands-on experiences in forests, in wetlands, in streams, some technical writing, like Angela was saying. So for me, consulting gave me the full gamut of like different tools that I needed as a freshly graduated science engaged individual. But I felt like that particular job, I could see some of the limitations. I didn't actually get the wildlife experience in terms of like mammals and birds and reptiles that I wanted. And that led me to going back to grad school. For anyone who's thinking about grad school, I always recommend, if you're going into the sciences, try to go where the funding and money is, because I was fortunate enough to go to Virginia Tech with a full tuition, coverage, because my study species was an endangered species. It's called a piping plover, and that'll come back up again in my talk a little bit later. So my very first piece of advice is like, go where the money is, make sure you find a good program for you. Don't spend money if you don't have to for grad school. And I knew that going into grad school, my goal was to make sure I left that institution with the credentials, the criteria, the network, so I could get my job at Fish and Wildlife Service when I graduated. I did another fellowship program in grad school called the Directorate Fellowship Program, another kind of summer internship. And that was in Asheville, North Carolina. I think it was in 2021. It was post-COVID. They offered like a remote internship. So I took the remote option. I didn't love it, but you kind of take what you can get during those post-COVID times. But again, it allowed me to keep my fish and wildlife connection present, and again, get more skills in that regard. Another thing during grad school, I guess I should probably talk more about my plovers. In grad school, my focus was the protection and population management of the piping plover. They're a small, I guess, like think about an American robin-sized bird that inhabited the shores of New York. And one thing when I started this program was I wanted to document everything that I did, because coming from Baltimore, I'd never seen a shorebird before. I'd never seen a plover before. I'd never gotten to be on a beach every day before. And I wanted to really just document all that I did to tell my story. I took photos and videos and ultimately made a documentary, which should be on the next slide, an autobiographical documentary about my experience as a Black woman doing shorebird conservation work, and got to do some more social media posts as well. At the time, I used Twitter a lot, and just tried to communicate to my followers, my audience, the importance of conservation, and whatever platform I could do. And that's also kind of led me to do this book, which came out more recently, but really taking every opportunity I have to educate people in whatever format is presented to me at the time. After grad school, I kind of at the end of grad school, between my shorebird work, my documentary, my other just passion for talking to people, I started getting invited to give talks and speaking engagements kind of like this. And it made me kind of think about, well, maybe when I graduate, I should just like make a business and just have an entity that I can do professionally to do different environmental programs, speaking engagements, whatever is needed of me. Let me be more of an official entity to pursue those opportunities instead of just a private citizen like Sharon Dorsey. So at the same time as Sharon Nature was kind of formulating and germinating in the ground, I was again looking for my real full-time job at Fish and Wildlife Service. I was still aiming for that as my full-time career. I was fortunate after I graduated to get a job with Fish and Wildlife Service with the help of the DFP, the Directorate Fellowship Program, because one of the perks of that program was this like hiring guarantee, quote unquote, with an asterisk. Nothing's guaranteed, but they really help you get that job. So I started with Fish and Wildlife Service probably about May of last year. Let's say that, last summer. And the only thing about that was the job was more of an admin role. It wasn't the science, it wasn't in the field. I kind of just took what I could get because I wanted to work for this agency. But and I enjoyed it. I did some outreach, I did some programming for people that came to, it's called the National Conservation Training Center in West Virginia, NCTC. People would come out and have different programs for youth, and I found some things I loved about it, but it wasn't my forever job. And unfortunately, I didn't have much say in the matter, but it became a job I left as well, with all the tumultuousness at the top of the year with the federal reduction in force. So then I was out of a job. But fortunately, I had that LLC in my back pocket. So having that kind of foresight to have like a business entity already established, an idea of what I wanted to do, I could contract and do part-time work around Baltimore City such that I could work with educators, school programs, do some speaking engagements. And it really just gave me more confidence to pitch myself to even more organizations to say, hey, I do shorebird work. I do conservation history as well. Similar to Angela, it's really important to me to share the stories of other Black individuals that have been in this field. So I created a program and presentation that highlights hidden figures in conservation, Black and mostly men and women, African Americans in conservation. So I pitched that to people and say, hey, do you have some time, a budget? I can distill this down to whatever age group or audience that you have. And it's being adaptable to whatever the client or, what they're looking for. So I say all that to say, my main advice to people that are kind of like young post-grad or thinking about their graduating soon, my first piece of advice is to build your network and maintain a good rapport with people like Bree, who I just happen to meet and keep meeting again and again. Second piece of advice is to make multiple plans. I'm such a planner. I had my eyes set on Fish and Wildlife Service. Things happen and you have to be ready to adapt. And it's great when you can control your destiny a little bit and have another opportunity that you create for yourself that you know you enjoy, that's in my niche. And I'm still expanding my services every day. Whatever I think about doing, let me expand this and offer this and expand this and offer this. So having that other avenue is great. So add that to your like backup plan. Third piece of advice is to document everything that you do, similar to what Bree's saying as a resume, but also through photography or videos. Storytelling through visuals is really impactful and important, especially to show the diversity of people that do this work. Don't be afraid to share those stories or those images on whatever platform is fit for you. I choose Instagram and just Instagram right now, but YouTube, I guess, for my documentary. But those are my three things. And I'm looking forward, like everyone else has said, looking forward to questions. And I'm happy to be a resource to folks that are interested in anything that I've covered, the book, the video, the grad school experiences, federal experiences, entrepreneur experiences. I'm an open book, so happy to stay in touch with whoever wants to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. So lastly, we have Russell Reed. Russell Howell Reed is a conservationist, climate activist, and writer, and the founder of Geographer, a forthcoming creative organization fostering cultural engagement in the environmental movement. A prominent youth climate justice advocate, he has led delegations to several United Nations negotiations and advanced the ongoing Youth Clause campaign launched at COP29. Russell previously served as a conservation manager of Virunga National Park in Eastern Congo, is a founding member of the biomaterials company Sway, and currently serves as a task force member of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, as well as a board advisor to Glass Half Full Louisiana. His writing has appeared in Atmos, Grist, Document, and other publications, and he is on spring residency at the Robert Rauschenberg Archives in New York City. As well as an industry fellow at Griffith University and lectures frequently at multiple universities worldwide. He holds an AB in geography from Harvard, the first awarded since the department's disbandment in 1948. He was a John Harvard Scholar, president of the Harvard Political Review, and co-chair of queer activist efforts Secret Court 100. He received the first MPhil in Anthropocene Studies from the University of Cambridge, where he was the Paul Williams Scholar. So Russell, same question to you as the others. If you could share a bit of your background, that would be great. You are, yeah. There.
And is my screen showing all right?
It just says audience window right now.
Strange. Let me figure that out really quick. Let's see. Is it showing now?
Yes. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, sorry for all the big, weird, long words in that, Marley. And also sorry, Brianna, because I must admit that I was the lucky kid who got to grow up with strange pets. I was actually born in San Diego and grew up on the first and only alpaca farm in San Diego, due to having some zany parents who had no background in it, just really wanted alpacas. So I have had long exposure to all sorts of interesting environmental questions and a love for animals and wildlife that led to a lifelong love for and commitment to protecting them. And I am, again, same as you, Sharon, kind of on that earlier side of my career as well. I just hit 5 years out from graduation from undergrad and have had a very all over the place career doing a lot of different work since then. So have lots of advice to other sort of young people navigating it. But I guess just starting from the beginning, I have known that I have this passion. I think anyone who's here choosing to listen to all of us today has that passion or that developing passion for doing something about the crisis that we're facing right now with biodiversity and with the climate as well. And it's really, there isn't a direct career path. As you've seen already, there are so many ways to do this work. And I think that what you will see from my experience is that there's a lot of different ways to approach it. And it's really about finding that alignment between your talents, your what makes you excited, where you want to be, what you want to do. And no matter where that leads you, there's an impact that you can make in biodiversity and in the environment. And so it's about finding what fits for you. But for me, I originally really thought that I would do,
Russell, sorry to
yeah,
interrupt you. I just want to make sure, are there slides that are supposed to be changing?
nothing's moving yet.
Okay,
So,
perfect. Just
so
making
no
sure.
fear
Thank
yet.
you. Sorry to interrupt.
Soon, I promise. This is just my little logo, by the way. But yeah, so I thought I was going to do a PhD. I was super interested in theory and I really enjoyed it in my undergrad, wanting to study, these real questions of how the world is changing and how our relationship as humans is changing to a changing planet. And so I ended up learning that my university had removed its geography department in 1948, actually due to a strange and homophobic history, as it turned out, but also because the field was seen as sort of flaky because it existed between the natural and social sciences, which is exactly the work that I believed in and wanted to do. So I brought that history to light, petitioned the faculty. No one was happy about it, but they did let me get the first degree in geography from the university in over 70 years. And I wrote my thesis at that time, which will come back up in a bit, on the history of mountain gorilla conservation at Virunga National Park, which is the first national park in Africa and was founded not under just the normal conditions that we know the racist foundations of conservation in general, but very specifically, it was the first national park in Africa to try to back the colonial project of continuing that racism. And so, looking at how from that park you could understand and trace these original issues with how we look at conservation into the present, and looking at now exactly 100 years of history, the park was founded in 1925, and seeing how even as we've changed a lot about how we do conservation, even as we've changed a lot of our opinions or approaches, and the world has changed a lot, we have not done the work we need to do to have a genuinely just, equitable, or effective conservation movement. So it's a very critical thesis, one I continued in my master's, but then I started getting a little tired of just being in rooms talking about things and really wanted to do something. And I ended up meeting a few amazing people and being one of the people who started a company called Sway. Now I will finally change my slides. And so I spent the first, well, really during my master's and then the first 3 years of my career working to build Sway, which is a biomaterials company making seaweed-based replacements for plastic packaging. So I found myself in the lab, I found myself working with, big brands and kind of seeing a very different end, sort of the consumer end or the last stage of environmental innovation. And I totally loved a lot about it. It went really well. The team continues to do amazing work. But there was this kind of couple things that happened at once around my 3 year mark, which is that we won the Tom Ford Plastic Innovation Prize, which was sort of my baby for over a year. It was really exciting. But at that exact same time, I was really realizing that, hey, a lot of the promises of the seaweed industry, a lot of what we're saying is better than, and it is better than petroplastics. It's not inherently true. We can't just assume that what we're sourcing is inherently good or better. And that led me to rural Colombia, working with the indigenous Wayuu to plant the first seaweed farms in the country after over 30 years of permits being rejected, again, due to racism. And so that leads me to publishing a very controversial at the time op-ed that now is sort of referenced as truth, which is nice, even though I've left the industry, but really looking at these issues and looking how the part I found myself at, the innovation, the consumer products, was really detached from the impact it meant to have upstream. And you will see in this direction that this is where I found myself doing seaweed farming instead. And this was, 8 hours away from the nearest large city. It required 4 forms of transportation. Any Colombian I met before going to this region was like, I've never been there. It was kind of this wild project that really ended up being completely life-altering for me because it brought me back to the front lines, back to source communities, back to the people who have been left out of the modern environmental movement, and seeing that that is where any change I want to be part of must begin. That led to, surprisingly, a cold email to the park director of Virunga National Park, the exact park I had written my very mean, very critical thesis on just a few years prior. And I basically saw that they were doing a lot of really interesting work. For quick context, Eastern Congo is the bloodiest conflict site since World War II. And it's now over 30 years into constant armed conflict with a really crucial national park sort of sitting right at the center of it. And what I found is that despite all my criticism, despite all the work left to do, the park was really starting to build this innovative model that was based on nature-based economies and actually including communities and aims of conflict reduction and poverty alleviation alongside their conservation goals. That wasn't just out of the pursuit of justice, it's also just a reality for conflict-based conservation sites. I sent them the email. I was surprised to get a response right away. Had to wake up at like 5 a.m. my time and get on a call with the park director, who grilled me for an hour straight, asked me a lot of hard questions about my thesis, and more or less said, no one's going to agree with how you look at this, right? And I was like, that's why I want to do it. That's why I feel like this is the work I need to do. And he said, the job's yours. And for the next 2 years, I was wondering what that job actually was because it was a lot of different things. But by technicality, I was the conservation manager of the oldest national park in Africa. And also, as will be a thread from what we've heard today, that work ended up being affected in March and April with the aid cuts because I was managing all of our Department of State and USAID funding. So that work came to a conclusion just a few months ago, but not after getting the chance to really return to that thing I had learned about in school. I knew what was wrong, but I really wanted to. It didn't feel like I had closed the circle yet, and I needed to go back and see, can I actually do something to push this in the right direction instead of just being frustrated with the way things are. So along the way, a strange thing happened where I ended up being invited to be a youth delegate at COP28, which is the UN climate negotiations that year in Dubai, ironically enough. And I ended up going, and that started kind of concurrently a new whole, set of interests for me. I have become a voice for youth climate justice and really trying to understand how we can get younger people into decision making over our own futures. This fight for our planet should not be run by people who, won't necessarily see that future. And it's been really fighting for a shift to say, hey, young people who are native to the climate crisis, who have a lot to lose and a lot to gain from fighting this fight, have a role that we should be able to play in all of this. And so on this poster, sorry, the poster, come back, is the original artwork from the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation, where I ended up doing a residency this year. But it was his official artwork for the first climate negotiations. And on it, it says, I pledge to make the Earth a secure and hospitable home for present and future generations. And my work since has sort of been saying, hey, you completely let us down. That was 1992. I wasn't born yet. I wasn't born for many years after that, actually. But we're here now, and we still want to make that same pledge for our generation and for many and many to come. And so bringing that to question and sort of holding leaders to task on this has now brought me to lead youth delegations with young people from all over the world in Azerbaijan, in Colombia, and soon my next one in Brazil this year, the very important COP30. But it's really led me to this place of understanding. Here's an essay I wrote on COP29 and youth activists there with some of the amazing people featured. Really seeing that you have a voice as a young person that is distinctive, relevant, and necessary to this fight. And I think that a big message that I'd like to leave everyone with is not only find your passions, follow them, switch things up. It requires that kind of innovation and creativity, but also knowing that your voice right now is just as important as it will be when you're 30 years into your career. There's different positional knowledge, there's different perspective. You might bring more urgency and activism now, and you might have a more institutional leadership role in the future, but this is for everyone, and your experience can be gained from really fighting that fight from the beginning and finding your role in this now. These three youth leaders are close collaborators of mine, friends that I've worked with to build the Youth Clause, which is our campaign to actually get countries in their national climate plans to recognize that young people are partners in that work. And the United Kingdom signed on, Liberia signed on, the Dominican Republic has signed on, and many more expected actually here in New York in the next 2 weeks. So it's not just me who thinks this. It would be convenient for me to think this as a young person who wants a voice, but we're really getting a ton of traction in that. And all that to say, get started now. It is never too late to do that work. And yeah, I think it's really just about exploring your lane, and being here in this call is a great first or second or third step.
Great. Thank you so much, Russell. So we have a couple of questions about job security and availability. So the first question is from Kate Oding, who asked, my question is whether you think there is more job security in the state versus private sector in the modern era. I just completed a fellowship program for my state's conservation department for federal funding to cause a hiring freeze, leaving me out of a job. Is it worth waiting out that hiring freeze, or should I pivot to other sectors? And then we have another attendee who asked, in this changing landscape with whole conservation departments being reduced and funding overall being reduced to a trickle, would you advise someone to get into that field generally? So I think there's probably a lot of insight most of you have to offer here. So I will pass the mantle to whoever wants to start first.
I can start. I do a lot of hiring. So we have 86 vacant positions in the Maryland Park Service. So I understand the issues with the hiring freeze. I'm just telling everyone we can still hire 10-month seasonal contractual positions. And so if you're interested, to apply for those. And I also tell people just find out where the money comes from, because even a lot of our archaeologists in the state of Maryland, their funding is being cut because it's considered DEI work. And I had no idea about that until they called and asked if I was hiring archaeologists, and they told me why. I always tell people to check out different parks. We have over 90 units in the Maryland Park Service, and they're all vastly different. We have piping plovers on Assateague, as I'm sure Sharon knows. And then we have the mountains of Western Maryland, and we have ORV trails out at Wolf Den Run. And so that's about as far away as you can get from each other, going east to west. In the south, we have Point Lookout, which has a beautiful historic lighthouse and camping and kayaking and a pretty lake. And then in the north, we have Fair Hill Natural Resources Management Area, which has the only hydroponic racing course in the state of Maryland. Another long story why the Maryland Park Service manages and maintains $1 million racing course, but those different opportunities will give you the experience that you're looking for. I saw someone else ask a question about getting experience. I think those 10-month contracts are probably the best way to get a range of different experiences. And so every park ranger in the Maryland Park Service is an emergency medical responder. We also go through interpretive training. So most park rangers can just start an interpretive program in the middle of a sentence, and that's a wonderful skill to have. It is a great way to not just share information, but connect people. And then we do a lot of research with wildlife and heritage and our forestry units. So you can always work with those different units. During all of our land management meetings, we talk about the overlap that we have. So I would tell people, if it is your love to be in conservation, please lean into that. Just because funding cuts are happening doesn't mean you need to stop. I am once again gonna age myself. When I started my environmental studies degree, That was 20 years ago. There were 6 of us in the class. I did environmental studies in bio. We had environmental studies in sociology. Then we had an anthropologist. And just last year, they had 50 people graduate from my college with that degree. So if that is what you love doing, please lean into that and don't let a few angry, spiteful people stop you from doing what you love. And as I said, I understand the hiring freeze. It is very agitating, but we're still doing our 10-month contracts. We train everybody, and we're going to be leaning more into our contractual workforce, since those are the people that we can control at the Park Service level. So I would encourage you to continue doing what you love and leaning into that.
Yeah. Super upvote that, Angela. Coming from the federal side, the federal conservation agencies are truly, and I can't say it enough, like suffering right now with the loss of so many positions and so much institutional knowledge and so much time. And that the work that was being done by those folks who left or were forced out still needs to be done. And those jobs will come back. I really firmly believe that. There's been a lot of like ebbs and flows. This is the most severe ebb, right? The most severe, like kind of pulling back of these jobs and stuff, but the work is still there and it has to happen. So I would agree, stay the course, go for seasonal stuff. We were getting waivers to hire seasonal jobs regardless. Seasonal is not always feasible for people who have like families or cannot move around or cannot afford to take lower paying jobs at this time. So maybe you gotta make something shake and do something different for a little bit of time, but don't give up on your conservation career and your end goal just because of what's happening right now, because it is going to get better. And I believe it.
My only quick thought would be just to recommend getting on different listservs for opportunities. Like Angela and Brianna were saying, things are still happening. There's still things out there, but just continue to be in the know, find listservs. I think Texas A&M Job Board was a major one I used to look at. But there's several other ones based in your region. Maybe there's nonprofits that are hiring for internships and things. And actually, an internship, my first year at grad school, took an internship. It wasn't the most paying, but with my part-time other work, it made my ends meet. So get creative and echo what the other ladies were saying.
Yeah, and not a ton to add there, but I think just thinking openly and creatively about how you can start doing the work you want to do is crucial. I never thought that I would do startups, and then I met some amazing people, helped on the side while I was in school, and then a job came from that. That ended up being great experience randomly to go work in a national park in the Congo. There's different ways of learning different skills, especially early on. And I found that just as beneficial as it can be to have a bunch of experience that goes A to B to C to D, jumping around from A to F to Z has worked just as well for me. And so I think just do things you're interested in, keep an open mind, and know that, you know, you can do something for a year or two and then switch it up and keep doing that like I have.
Exceptional advice from all of you. So thank you so much for that. I'm just going to keep going through our questions here because I want to get to as many as we can from our audience. And we have about 20 minutes left. So Grace Peterman asked, how do your workplaces support your mental and emotional health? I think also at the top of everyone's minds, especially right now. How do you advocate for yourself in these careers that expect constant passion and efforts to serve both people and nature?
I'll try my best to answer that. That is a great question. I saw it in the chat. On July 1st, the Maryland Park Service lost a ranger in action. It was the first ever in the history of the Maryland Park Service. And so I've been very open and honest with my team. It's a gentleman named Eric Ledbetter. My dream was to run Freedman State Historical Park with him, and he would be my assistant manager. When I took this job, I told him that I could no longer do that, and we laughed and we had a nice meal. And then a few months later, he passed away on the job. And so I've been very honest with my mental health struggles dealing with that. I spend a lot of time in my parks. I already explained why. And so the last 2 weeks of August, I was on the Eastern Shore. The last 2 weeks of July, I was in Southern Maryland. And I just meet with my people and I talk to them. I found that a lot of people don't actually know that the state of Maryland has EcoCareers, and they don't know how to use your insurance to actually get therapy. they don't know what to do and what to ask a therapist. So I'm just going to share with you all, since I've spoken to a lot of my people and they don't even know what to do. Talk therapy has been helpful for me. I've had to repress my personal feelings about this because I'm representing the department, but I always tell people, make a list of who you are. So I'm a firstborn daughter. If you couldn't tell, that's a big part of my personality. I am a sister. I am a friend, and I'm a ranger. I list all of my big components of my personality, and I make sure that my therapist can help me with that. And then I have questions for them. So I tell people I've interviewed 6 or 7 people to be my therapist. And if you're lucky, you get to hear all of Angie's problems twice a week. And I'm also very honest with what we do in Maryland State Parks. You saw the yoga image. The lady leading that is actually a maintenance supervisor's wife. So we have her do yoga on the beach and a few other locations throughout the year. And then we also sit and we talk, and we're very honest with people about what's going on and how being a first responder impacts you as a person. So I tell people about all the facilities we have the access to as the Maryland Park Service. We work with Maryland State Police and the Natural Resources Police. So I'm trying to work across multiple units and multiple departments to make sure my people have everything that they need to be successful in this job. And personally, I'm sure you saw all my pretty pictures. Those are all my photos from Maryland State Park. So when I'm having a tough time, I watch the sunset, I watch the sunrise, I get chewed up by bugs, I put my feet in a creek, I put my hair in the river. I find my own personal way to be rejuvenated. And I recently took my nieces to a mountaintop cabin. The oldest one drew a picture of butterflies. That is my favorite piece of art. So I move that around with me when I'm working from home. And I have another pretty piece of art from my youngest niece. It is us hugging in a state park. I have that in my office. And I return to Harriet Tubman about every other month. And that's really inspirational for me because history is still growing. They're still doing archaeology on Ms. Tubman. I know a ton about her life as an outdoors woman and the way I connect with her. So I just make sure I take care of myself. Kind of like when you're on a plane, I can't care for the Park Service and our acreage and our staff if I'm not taking care of me. So I'm trying my best to make sure my staff have everything they need, but I'm also trying to take care of myself. And I know that was a very long-winded answer, but we are all struggling with that. Me and my team are in the trenches, and I'm very honest with them about that. I'm honest about hiring, I'm honest about budgets, but I also make sure to offer them everything that I can across multiple departments.
I would love to point everyone to a resource called the Resilience Project. They're based out of the UK, but it's really specifically for young people working in climate. And they have a bunch of great specific resources and events and workshops and things like that around the world for people in our generation who are trying to do this work. There's sort of a double-edged sword, and something I often say, and many of us do, is that we feel better about the future of the planet because we get to be engaged in solutions that are helping us get to a better place. And on one end, I think that is true. On another end, however, I also think that it comes with a lot of unique challenges, and sometimes you can feel the weight of the world on your shoulders, and it's not on your shoulders, but it is easy to feel that way when you're up against the kinds of the context that we're in right now. But I guess just one more quick reframe on this question that I think is another layer that matters a lot to us. We are Family Foundation. We did an ongoing study on what intergenerational collaboration is good for and how it works and why it's so useful in organizations. And one of the main things that we pulled from all of this research and all of these participants is that young people, one of our key strengths, one of the things that makes a room different when we're in it, is that we see our emotions as strengths, not weaknesses. I think there's a very old and inherited way of looking at things that work is work. And you're supposed to come and, you can cry when you get home, but at work, you're supposed to keep a straight face and just do the job. And the reality, in my opinion, of any and all work, but definitely of environmental work, is that this is a collision of, your passions and also a feeling that you need to be part of this work, and also that you're showing up to do it for your job. And so it's a lot more complex and layered, but that's actually that article I showed briefly that I wrote for Atmos is called "The Kids Are Crying at the Conference of Parties." And it's all about looking at that exact thing. How do we destabilize old ways of doing things that don't serve us by bringing our anger or our frustration or our hope or our optimism to these rooms? It can be a strength. That doesn't mean it doesn't need to be navigated closely. That means that you should be, maybe even more so, looking for those mental health resources and advocating for them in your workplace. But it also means that you shouldn't shy away from living your full emotional life in this context and bringing your full self to this work. I have found that that can be really powerful. And when it isn't well received, it's also a good sign that maybe I'm not in the right room.
Brianna or Sharon, do either of you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think I just want to add that in the interview process, like when you're looking for a job, like you can also ask them what the work-life balance is, get a sense of that from the jump. But also it's your responsibility to take care of your mental health and advocate, like you're saying, and maybe don't expect the job to make sure you make the time for yourself. Your job may not, and make sure you have the things that Angela was saying, that Russell was saying, to pour back into your own bucket, because they may take more of you than you really have. So make sure you pour back into yourself. It's great if the employer does prioritize mental health, like Angela does in her office, but not everyone will. So just be realistic and know that they may not. So do that for yourself.
Thanks so much, Sharon. And Brianna, unless you had anything to add, I'll move on to the next question. So these are really great questions as well. 2 questions about volunteering and exploitation. The first is, what would you advise for getting started in this career that would allow someone to make a livable wage? So not just volunteering and taking minimum wage seasonal positions. And Amy Ducre asked, what are some red flags, subtle or more obvious, to look out for exploitation and conservation? So many orgs want us to volunteer and intern unpaid for years before maybe even considering us for a paid position, or do things like, if you really cared for the environment, you would blank. It's difficult to understand the line between exploitation and paying your dues. They seem like the same thing.
Can I take this one?
Please do, yes.
Yes. As somebody who worked in youth employment and workforce development on the federal level, we would, contract with different groups to host the internships for us on the sites. I must implore you, please do not take unpaid internships. You are worth so much more and you have so much more value, and there is no experience they can give you that merits you not being paid for your expertise. And I'm saying that knowing that you might still be in college, you have expertise, right? What you're learning, you are paying to go to school to be trained on this stuff. So you already have expertise, even if you are going to be an intern, and that has value. If that's a red flag to me. If you're not going to list how much the salary is, if you're not going to list how much the pay is, or if it's going to be unpaid, that should be a red flag that you should evaluate real carefully if you even want to go any further with those orgs. I know that rules out a lot of places, but that's probably for the best, right? And if I have to do some kind of I was like a waitress in college. And I also did my lab work during the school year, but I was a server. So I had money just to survive. That's what I had to do. Right? Don't take your conservation career at the cost of yourself. This is really important work, but it doesn't have to be self-sacrificing work, right? It's an industry where people will it's a love project, it's a passion, especially as a federal employee. I saw being a conservationist and being a park ranger as my whole identity. And that was great and it was wonderful. But when I left, I was like, whoa, what am I now? Right. So in that time, you need to still have things that you do for you, and that some lines that you're going to draw that hey, I can come in later. Is it going to be paid? Or am I going to have comp time where I can come in, I'll work late and then come in late tomorrow? Right. It's very exploitative because we all love it. You'll get up and go miss netting at 5 a.m. and then work the whole 8 hours afterwards, which makes it 12. Reconsider that stuff. People might look at you a little sideways first, but that's part of the change. And if that is happening, maybe you need to evaluate if you should stay there and give of that, So then the other question is so what do you do instead? Right? There's a tide turning, there's a change happening, there's a push from the federal side and other sides to start listing pay and start being more equitable in what we're doing, because it's a very narrow group of folks who can afford to take an unpaid internship, and that's who's been getting the internships. So a little bit of patience is required, right? But like, don't be afraid to just ask, hey, what is the range for this, right? Like that's things that you should be allowed to ask before you get to the nth degree and you spent all this time prepping your resume, doing an interview, multiple interviews, and then you're not going to hear about the pay until that stage. That's not cool. Like you have a right to ask about a range or what past candidates were typically paid. Like you can ask those things and that's totally fine. So you have a lot of value is what I want to just impress upon folks. And the paying your dues, that mentality is kind of aging out. Honestly, those folks are starting to retire and move on and be replaced by people like Angela and myself who were GS whatever we were, and even Sharon too when we were in federal service and that like that's over. We can't do that.
I totally agree, Brianna. And I think it's important to be honest with yourself. If it looks like it might be, that flag might be a little pink, turning red, it's red. It really often is. And we have probably all, whether for something short term or longer term, been in positions of like, oh wow, I'm being overworked. Oh wow, I'm being expected to go past the hours or on the weekends. I've seen it all and at times have done it all, and it isn't worth it. But I think another thing that comes to mind with all of this is that it is easy, especially really early on, to look at the jobs that feel the most obvious. Like, oh, if I want to be Angela one day, I need to start by being a volunteer in a park. And I need to work through every single step of that to do so. And often, what you'll find is that being focused in one area can also lead to some of the issues we're seeing now. I was working in conservation with USAID funding. That is gone. And if I were looking only at other jobs in international conservation sites, as a lot of that financial architecture collapsed overnight, I would probably still be looking. But there's other work that I do, other things that I care about that are all connected. I have a voluntary position as an advisor to the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. That is work that I choose to do in a limited amount of time for free because it continues to allow me to engage in work I really care about in an advisory capacity while I'm focused on more of this sort of climate activism and creative work right now. So I think know that you can start somewhere different than you want to end up. I never thought I would work at a startup. I ended up halving my salary when I left. I literally took 50% of that pay. And part of the reason I was able to do that is because I had saved money working in a private sector thing first. So get creative, be open, and maybe apply to a couple of things that don't really seem like you're the perfect fit or seem a little different than you expected. And even if it's just to get rejected, or even if it's just to have an interview and be like, definitely not, it's helpful to consistently check on, am I in the right place? Is there something else that I can try, to allow yourself to have that flexibility and not feel stuck in a job that isn't paying you what you deserve?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one small thing quickly. I had 2 unpaid internships with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but I helped them write papers. So while it was unpaid, my college gave me a vehicle to drive to and from the wildlife refuge, and I got to add 2 papers to my resume in undergrad. And so that was a fairly big deal. So I don't want people to just say no to those. There are support networks for that. Like I said, my school covered my mileage, and I thought that was really helpful for them. It was 3 hours from where I was going to school, and that was a big deal. I also tell people to value yourselves. Our volunteers fill out a form, and so we track their hours. If you get over 100 hours, you get a free park pass to visit Maryland State Park. So everyone in your vehicle can visit for free. So we even value our volunteers. After working and learning so much about American slavery, I tell people there's no way I'm not going to pay you for your time and your efforts. And I come into every position with that attitude. Harriet Tubman's first job, she was a maid in New Jersey and Philadelphia, and she was so happy to get paid. So I just share that quote with people. You can't learn about her life the way that I did and live portions of your life based on her without being able to support yourself. So I think that is key. And so a pinkish flag, I like that, Russell. I'm going to use that. If they don't track your extra hours, that is a pink flag. So I'm not in a position where I make overtime, but I get comp time. They tell us to track all of those hours. And I always tell people to be honest because my predecessor wasn't honest and she only did 40-hour work weeks. And so they were like, Angie, you're not working 40 hours. And I'm like, this is what the Maryland Park Service requires. If you want me to work 40 hours, I can. You're going to get a very different service. So I always tell people to value yourself. Make sure you know what you can get out of a situation. And if they don't track time, that's a very nice pink flag.
Can I just say one other thing too about transferable skills? Because I see it in the questions too. Like you can do a thing that will transfer. When I was hiring education staff and park rangers, my favorite thing to see on the resume was a barista, because that means you can handle a high pressure environment. You already know how to do customer service. You can talk and get to the point quickly. Baristas, babysitting, off hair stuff. I love seeing that when it comes to my rangers because I know you can handle some high stress situations. So think about those and don't take those things off your resume if it seems like it has nothing to do with it. Just write the stuff about them for what you're going to need to do in that next job.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we have only a couple of minutes left, and we're not going to get to all of these questions, but maybe if I can put it out to our panelists. There was a question about starting an LLC, and Sharon answered that, but then indicated that, Brianna, you might also be able to add something. So if you have anything to add on that question in the chat, that would be great. And then maybe for all of you, if you could pop into the chat what other skills you think, for anyone, I guess maybe more on the hiring side, what other skills you think applicants should have to help you stand out in these big crowds today. And then the question I'll pose to you all with the time that we have left is from Jasmine Parham asked, how can I get experience with specific field skills? For example, I'm currently a grad student and I'd like to learn how to run my own mist net lanes to target ornithology labs, but my current project doesn't require it and none of my advisors have that experience. And I have a feeling, Sharon, you might have some insight on that.
Yeah, yay, mist netting, yay, birding. I definitely had the same dilemma in grad school. And for me, I had to volunteer I was in Virginia for school, but I live in Baltimore. I found a local bird banding station in Baltimore that I drove up to on the weekends or I think during breaks to get that experience. So if it's not offered in your local community, you may have to do your own field trip to get that experience. Stay with a friend, stay where you can. But yeah, let me find the question. Did I answer the question, Marley?
Yeah, I think, yeah. Just the question was where to get those specific field skills experience.
Maps. There's also the maps. I think what it stands for. Mapping avian population. Map spanning stations are pretty populated across the country. But for bird related things, definitely take down my email if you have any specific questions. And happy to connect you with different opportunities to get that hands-on birding experience because it's great to get some mist net practice.
Thanks so much, Sharon. And we are right at time, but if anyone has, a single final thought they want to throw in there, please don't hesitate to come off mute for a second.
Marley and David, feel free to share my email address with everybody. You can just write it down. It's just my name, angela.crenshaw@maryland.gov. I do a lot of events at Maryland State Parks for everybody. So I want to make sure everybody comes out. And I want people to feel comfortable in nature. So this was our third year officially celebrating Pride. I am trying to make the Maryland Park Service as inclusive and accepting and a nice place to work because when I was coming up, it was not. So if you all want a tour of Maryland State Parks or to join any of my OA Outdoor Afro events or my Girl Trek events, just shoot me an email. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Angela. And I'm feeling like I need to make a trip down that direction to visit the parks now, especially seeing all those photos. They're really spectacular. So thank you again to all of our panelists for being here this afternoon. You all had really exceptional advice, I think, for the folks that were in attendance. And thank you as well to our audience for joining us and for the questions that you brought to this conversation, because I think those as well really help to bring out some helpful advice. And with that, I'm going to pass things back over to my colleague, David Corsar, and he's going to close out our first day of the summit.
Thank you, Marley, and thank you, panelists. Really fantastic advice. And yeah, Marley, I want to echo what you just said about the participants, the audience, really making this a really interesting and introspective day of events. For those of you that were able to participate from our opening workshop, keynote, and both panels, thanks for sticking it out these last 5 hours. Kudos to you, and I know that there's going to be some that are back on Thursday for another 5 hours of content. Probably the top question that I get in the lobby is folks are interested in the recordings. So whether you participated in this last one and missed one of the earlier sessions, all of the recordings are available to registrants pretty much immediately. Zoom takes like an hour or so to do a transcription and email it out. But then we'll also be following up after the week is over with all of the recorded sessions, and we'll be posting those later on to YouTube as well. Yeah, come back Thursday. We have another fantastic day of workshops and keynotes and panels, all focused on climate careers. Obviously, there's a huge overlap when we're talking biodiversity and climate, but we needed something to make it thematic. So thanks, everyone, again, and we will be in touch.